Hey friends, it's Melvin. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Here's just a few quick things I wanted to notify you guys about before we get started. First up, very soon, new episodes will be releasing Wednesday mornings rather than Tuesday. So don't panic if you don't see a new episode on Tuesday. Just wait a little longer and you'll see it in your feed. Second, we've introduced a mailbag. Check those show notes and toward the bottom you'll see a mailbag link. You'll then be able to text us any questions you might have about movies, the movie industry, or any movie/Christian related questions you might have. Then we'll respond in a future episode, so send us your questions now. Up next, Patreon polls, which are available to Patreon supporters at the $3 tier or higher, have been updated. Supporters can now suggest films or shows to be reviewed at the end of each month. The two most liked submissions will become the options for the Patreon poll, so if you want to hear us talk about your favorite movie or show, join our Patreon and start campaigning. And lastly, whether you're a new or longtime listener, please consider writing a review or rating the Cinematic Doctrine podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Apart from financially supporting on Patreon, these are the two most helpful ways to support the show. And that's it. Enjoy the episode. Happy October, Melanie. It's October.
Happy October.
My wife joked that this was Halloween 1st. Well, now it's Halloween 4th. But rather than calling it October, we just call it Halloween, which is fair because I just love October, or I love Halloween anyway.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about for this month?
I'm just excited for the cool weather. I am very much a scarf wearing person. I love to wear sweaters. I love to smell the cool, crisp air. Those are all the things that I like. It's just very chill aesthetically. But I also do like, I like the idea of Halloween. I feel like, and I say that because, I only say that because now that I'm in my mid 30s or almost mid 30s, like you're not going out like trick or treating like you did when you were a kid. But I'm also not often invited to like Halloween dress-up parties, but if I was, I would totally go because I think that'd be really awesome. But it's still fun, and that's why I say I like the idea of Halloween. I don't get to partake as much as I used to when I was younger.
Yeah, it's been a good October already, and it's only been 4 days. I'm really excited for the rest of the month. We started October with the Haunted Mansion episode, and now we're doing a Tim Burton, I guess, asterisk, because he only sort of created Nightmare Before Christmas, but his name is all over it. But we're doing his series, his 3 movies of
stop motion
animation material. The Nightmare Before Christmas, then Corpse Bride, and then Frankenweenie will be starting in release order. So the most popular ones first, I guess, and then everyone will click off. And they'll definitely click off when we get to Frankenweenie,
stay
probably.
On, please.
Yes, there's so many interesting things to talk about with these movies. I figured we would pretty much do a topic. It'll be like a Let's Talk in the respect that we're talking about 3 movies with very similar themes and styles, but there'll be movie discussions insofar as each movie will get about 20 to 30 minutes to talk about. I feel like that's a fair way to summarize how this is going to turn out. So
I was also going to say it might be helpful too, just for people who might not know what we mean when we say stop motion. It could be helpful to kind of just describe what it is.
Gosh, it's like a mixture here with like some of it's clay, some of it's...
Yeah, so it says that stop motion, also known as stop frame, is an animation technique to make a physically manipulated object appear to move on its own. It's often used with clay and called claymation. And then of course it says most of Tim Burton's films, he uses clay models or puppets with very detailed moving parts. So a small detail, I would say, of like how intricate this is. So you have this doll that they have to change the facial expressions with each frame to make it look like it's moving. And so the one guy who was behind the scenes said that for every eye blink, they had to use like a new clay piece and that each shape was different depending on the shape of the doll. And I was like physically stressed just thinking about how much work they have to do just to get a character to blink, let alone move its mouth and move its hands. And it's really technical. But when you look at these films and how they flow so well, you just really appreciate all the hard work. Like, I think kudos to all of those animators and all of those puppeteers. Like, it was just really, really phenomenal work on all three films.
Yeah, and what's interesting, since we basically, I know I pretty much watched the three movies like in succession, like really quite quickly. So I started to get used to pretty like similar techniques. So like particular models where their faces are very, very detailed, but then they clearly have a part of their mouth that can clip off to be replaced with a new mouth model. And they cleverly hide it, similar to the Jim Henson Stitch on the Muppets, where they just are so perfectly stitched that you can't even see the stitches, which is amazing. And a lot of that stuff starts to come out, and it just improves the level of appreciation, because different characters, with regards to how bombastic their designs are just require completely different ways of moving the creatures. If there's ever like close-ups, sometimes it's not that they just took the camera and zoomed in, it's that they have like another model that's been enlarged, so you can get these very detailed things. Especially, I think, in Corpse Bride, there was a lot more of that. And I'm sure in Frankenweenie, the dog had a ton of different models for sizing.
I'm sure.
So I didn't have time to watch a lot of special features. I did watch the Frankenweenie short film he did in 1984. So we'll talk about that when we get up to the 2012 movie. But
the other thing I wanted to mention too that I thought was like really gnarly was the what I thought it was interesting how the animators will watch the voice actors do the acting of each part and then try to like mimic some of the things that they're watching, which kind of reminds us of this high-tech world of like Avatar and Planet of the Apes, where, you know, you have like the dots on people's faces and they're able to manipulate it that way. But obviously this is clay and puppets, so they're just literally using their eyes and like watching these people and like the quirks. And they even have like a phonetic sheet. So whenever like the actor uses like an M, they know they have to like switch the mouth to like be more closed or more clipped. So it's so they're really like, if you watch some of the special features, it's really neat. They're very, very particular, and you can tell like they really tried to make it look as accurate as possible. And I would even encourage people listening, if you ever want to check some of that stuff out, if you think it's interesting, there's a lot of behind the scenes. Well, I don't know if it's a lot, but there's plenty of like behind the scenes stuff on YouTube that you can watch, and it's really cool.
Let's talk about Nightmare Before Christmas. So this actually fits into the category of movie that we've been talking about a lot lately, which is Melvin might have seen it, but he doesn't remember. But
I was just going to ask you, like, was this your first time watching it? Like, do you like, or
be?
It might. So, okay. I was like, did you find that out? I wasn't sure if you did.
I don't remember seeing it as a kid. I remember wanting to see it as a kid. I vaguely remember some imagery seemed familiar, but it wasn't like with them.
Do you remember if maybe your parents said that you couldn't watch it, or was it more just you never got around to it? Because I do know that growing up, there were, I don't want to say it was solely the Christian community, but I do know that
but basically sometimes.
Not everybody. Maybe. I just remember it being like, oh, we can't watch it. We can't show this film because it's about like monsters and death and stuff. So I guess my parents didn't have a problem showing it to us because their belief was that if we educate our children on what's real and what's fake, and we just explain to them this is just a movie, but we are Christians and we actually like this is what we actually believe, and kind of can differentiate between art and reality, then we would be fine.
Teaching you literacy. They're teaching you how to discern what is real and what is fake. That is a very good skill.
And I don't even think they had to do like much. Like I think we just
kids
knew.
get it. Yeah, kids are smart. in the briefest of brief, to remind anybody who didn't already rewatch it on October 1st or doesn't know what we're talking about, it's a musical. The premise is Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King of Halloween Town, is getting bored of his particular role. Year in and year out, he does this Halloween celebration, and then they just get ready for the next one. Because he's bored, he goes and does a depression walk, and he finds these doors in a forest, and he finds one with for us, we would know that they're all different holidays. For him, he isn't sure. He falls into the Christmas one. We get the best song in the movie. What's this? At least the funniest song.
Oh, I love that
very
song.
good.
Yes.
But he's so enamored with the holiday festivities of Christmas that he returns to Halloween Town and says, we're going to do Christmas. So that's basically the movie. And then you see the hijinks of what happens afterward. Hey, don't forget, there's a lot of fun content missing from this episode because you're not listening on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine and support for $3 a month to gain access to uncut episodes with upwards of 40 minutes of bonus content each. You'll thank me later. So here's what I'll say about Nightmare Before Christmas insofar as what I knew before watching the movie for the maybe, possibly, potentially first time in my life. I knew that this property was huge as a market sellable type thing. I'm talking massive. And it is amazing when you think about it. It is a Halloween and a Christmas movie. So you can screen it for 3 months straight.
Yep.
And people will just go see it. You can wear the clothing and the merchandise and have stuff set up for a good 3 months, which is also just nice if you are the kind of person who does festivities, because you put stuff up for Halloween, you take it down. You don't know what to put up for Thanksgiving because who knows? And then you go into Christmas and you set stuff up, and then the New Year's happens and you take it down. But Nightmare Before Christmas can stay up and you can forget about it. And then by the time you're ready to take it down, it's been 3 months, so you take it down. Anyways, it just hits all that. Plus it has great songs. Songs. And so it's a ton of fun to listen to.
Songs.
Yeah, and I definitely wanted to ask you about, like, if you knew about the impact or at least the legacy of the music. I know Danny Elfman, of course, is just like notoriously huge, not notorious in a bad way, more in the like, so he's just a massive name. But
yes, so Danny Elfman is probably one of my favorite film composers. So the music in this film, I think, is so genius. I think every song is just very charming. Everybody has their favorites. One of my favorites is Kidnap Mr. Sandy Claus.
Oh, that's good.
And I love how they call him Sandy Claus. I just think it's so great. I've always loved the music, and it's a very nostalgic feeling. And I think about it all the time when I think about my childhood, because me and my brothers were obsessed with this movie and with the music. And I even remember once or twice we had a night where my brother Daniel's on his cello trying to figure out like the music, and my brother Joey was like at the piano and I'm singing all the songs, and we were just playing around like trying to figure it out. And it's just such a sweet memory to have. And I could listen to this music any time of the year and just have a grand old time. And even just the having fun doing the voices in This Is Halloween it's just great. It's very, very charming. It's very sweet in a lot of ways. Like Sally's song is like very, very sad, but very, very sweet sounding. You just have a lot of variety also. And even just the Oogie Boogie song.
Gosh,
oh my
it's
gosh.
all good. It really is.
It's all amazing. It's great music, great lyric writing, great performances, which I don't know if you knew this, but I believe, and you can double check me, but I believe it's Danny Elfman singing.
Yes, that's Danny Elfman. And then the standard voice is Chris Sarandon.
Got it. Yeah, so I just think that that's even just so interesting how a composer could just, and again, I don't remember what he said about singing for Jack and why he decided to do it, because I'm sure there's like hundreds of thousands of singers out there, but I think maybe this is what I'm imagining, he just loved the character so much he just wanted to do it himself. And actually I kind of like that, and he did a great job. I think he sounds amazing. So yeah,
all of we'll definitely get, I think we'll continue this thread of music when we get into Corpse Bride. But there's something about all of the vocals in Nightmare Before Christmas where everyone feels present, and in doing so,
Yes.
like really creates these characters into living, breathing things in a way that's so much more lifelike than anybody alive in Frankenweenie. And in that way, like I can picture in my head, even just after just watching the movie one time, like the intonations and the like, just I can picture like what their throat probably looks like. That's how like detailed it is.
Oh
There's so much power.
There's character also.
Yes, character,
and you don't always get that in a song.
Confidence,
like I think there's
even, yeah.
Yes, I think there's like a lot of songs that are really, really well written. But I think what's also charming about Nightmare is that you can hear the character in how they sing. So if you even think about Sally's song, she has even though she is very strong and she's very daring, especially as she goes to try to help Jack towards the end and tries to even save Santa Claus. And this is not a spoiler. If you haven't seen this movie by now, that's on you. So I'm
if
just
it's a movie including Santa Claus, he needs to be saved at some point. That's just a
exactly.
fact.
So she goes to save him, risking her own neck to do it. And so this isn't to say that she's not strong, but she does have a very like soft, timid voice. And so when you hear her sing, you kind of hear that as well. And I just really liked that about her song and the way that she sang it. Because sometimes it's not about having like the most, like the biggest, beltiest, showy voice. Like I want to hear the character. I want to feel the emotion, and I want to really be able to be immersed in what's happening. And I feel like with each character and how they sang, you really got that.
Yeah, they're a criticism I've heard for certain live action remakes for the Disney animated musicals is that the performers are coming in singing, but they're not performing. And they need to not just sing the songs, but also act as the character. And the singing is part of the storytelling, not so much actually taking place in the world, unless they, of course, recognize that every character is singing, or maybe one character notices it and that's the joke. But the point being that like that's just how they translate it. Whereas like, yeah, your point of like this movie, there seems to be like this absolute pairing, which is impressive because now you're introducing the animators who then have to translate that too.
Yes.
The singing is translating both character and also excellent vocals. And then these animators are like leaning over with their hunchbacks and their harnesses, trying not to get like totally hunchbacked by the time they're like 60.
Like every little detail of the face.
It's just like gnarly. And
to make like a skeleton look so animated, I think is amazing. Like absolutely amazing.
And his introduction is so good too. I really like it's just it's really impressive. I thought the movie was very well paced. I thought it was beautiful in terms of visuals. It knew how to play around with a lot of creativity. Obviously the music's great. We already mentioned that. And in addition to that, like it has Elfman's really killing it with his ability to turn songs into stupendously catchy melodies. And he just does that with every song. He doesn't always do that. I've heard another observation of Elfman, which is if he's not doing creative melodies, he's just crescendoing the entire time, which is often very true. Also, he loves loud sounds, so it makes sense. But then by the time you get to like 10-20 minutes in the movie, you also realize, oh my gosh, this movie's extremely funny. And I just was like constantly having something else to laugh at while watching the movie all the way up to the very end. It's
what did you think of I know this is a small detail, what did you think of the toys the children got for Christmas?
Oh my Halloween gosh, that scene was great.
Wasn't that awesome? Like they so take out this like shriveled head and the parents like start freaking out.
Yeah, that was so good.
Or the snake that's like eating the tree. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I love that everything was like genuinely scary and threatening because it just adds to how fun it is.
But it's still funny.
So goody. So
and
good.
That was something, and I know we're going to talk about this in all of the films, but that was actually another question that I wanted us to kind of think through. It's like, what is it about things that are gothic or morbid in a children's film that we find so
palatable?
Either funny or just interesting or fascinating or enjoyable. I would even venture to say enjoyable, because there's things in this movie that are actually very, very scary.
Yeah.
A child is holding a shriveled head.
It's so
like
funny.
a huge snake is eating a tree. You've got
Oogie Boogie exists.
Oogie Boogie about to like
exists.
turn them into like mush, or
Mhm.
like turning a dead rat into a hat on somebody's head. Like these
It's
are
so
just things
funny.
that are really disgusting when you like step back and think about it. But I
Mhm.
guess I'm just wondering, like, how do they achieve that balance
How do they
of
get away
something
with
that's
it?
very right? How do they get away with it in a children's film? And I actually don't even know. I wouldn't even know how to describe like the line between like comical and child friendly to like, whoa, that's like way too much.
Have you ever
I don't
seen?
know if you had any thoughts.
Have you
on
seen
that.
Big with Tom Hanks? Where he
If
gets
I did,
big?
I don't remember. I maybe was that like a scene where they're like playing on a piano,
Yes,
but
yeah,
their
that
feet.
is,
I only
with their
remember
feet.
that, and I don't remember
That's
anything
usually
else.
what people remember.
Right.
So a teenager plays a wishing game, and then he turns into an adult. And his first night
Yes.
being an adult, he can't go home because he's an adult. So the parents will be like, "Who are you? I don't know
Right.
you." So he has to go find enough scraps to get an apartment. And when he gets this apartment, there's gunshots being shot outside, and he's freaking out. He goes to bed whimpering like a child. It's great because Tom Hanks is acting like a kid. And then
Right.
later in the movie, after he's used to being an adult, it shows him going into his apartment. He's watching a movie, and it's like an action movie. So there's a ton of gunshots. And then the joke is that when he turns it off, the gunshots are still going. And he looks outside and he chuckles and he goes to bed. Totally fine.
Oh.
I think the idea is when you're surrounded with like the gothic atmosphere, throwing in something gothic, it's not shocking anymore. You're kind of used to it. And I think just the fact that the setting and the world of the three films are so, I'll say it, passively oppressive, in the sense that like they're not, none of these movies are mean, and they're not being mean to the
Right.
audience either, but they're all very much like death, which is Tim Burton. That's like all of his movies I've seen from him so far have always been having a fascination or a cynicism towards life and death. And so I feel like by surrounding everything in that flavor, it means when he tosses in a bit more spice by making a joke about death and people not being allowed to get married because one of them's dead or something, like that to me, like I think it just comes off more palatable, which is why, like, you're mentioning the jokes with the terrifying toys at the end, and then I look over here and it says Nightmare Before Christmas rated PG. And it's just like, it's like, yeah, I guess, okay.
I guess.
And I think by being an animated movie, and then also being an animated movie that is stop motion, makes it look like toys, and so the fact that they're toys makes it more fun.
Point.
There's just, I think it really comes down to who's working on it and creating with it. Plus, like, the tools that are being played with in Nightmare is all of the characters are just scary monsters, but quirky. So they're just like not really that scary. Oogie Boogie being the most, and even then he looks like a pillow. So like
that is true.
They
I would say the werewolf actually looks really terrifying.
The werewolf does look terrifying,
but he's also wearing a plaid shirt, which I think maybe makes it less terrifying that he's wearing clothes.
A hillbilly.
Yeah.
You may not know this, but the easiest way you can show your support for Cinematic Doctrine is to rate and review the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. So press pause and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And then press play again so you can hear the rest of the show. Yeah, I like this a lot. When I was watching it, I was enjoying it, but since I have watched it, I have enjoyed it more. Like when I think back to it, when I remember songs and I start humming them in my head, and it's just good. It's really good.
Yeah.
And it's no surprise that then Henry Selick, director for this, would then do Coraline, and it would be like he would just hit it out of the park again. I do believe he did Wendell and Wild from last year, and it wasn't received as well, but it was still considered pretty good. That's on Netflix, but and that one's a little more adult than the two of those. But yeah, I thought Nightmare Before Christmas was just amazing, and I can understand why it has so much like cultural impact, because it is just like a fun, nice movie, and it's like the length of a TV special. It's like a little bit longer, 76 minutes.
Get straight to the point. You know, you get
so good.
Yeah, just really, it's really compelling. And I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense why it's so revered, because it's a great story. And I do think that it's timeless. I think that it can be enjoyed for many, many years to come by all ages. So just the fact that like you're in your 20s, this is technically, we're going to call this your first time watching it.
Yeah.
We'll call it the first time watching it, and you're enjoying it. I think just speaks volumes that it's not just a kid's movie that was nostalgic that you can still enjoy it, but the quality may not be that great. Like, it's a very quality story, quality animation, quality music. And it's not even like a ton of music. I feel like it's like just the right amount of music for the kind of film that it's being made for. So yeah, all those things coming together just so well. Yeah, it's just a great experience. So if you haven't seen it,
you gotta watch
anyone listening, I would highly recommend this film. It is wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It is really good. What did you think of Corpse Bride? This also was my first time, I know definitively. But what did you what do you think of what do you think of Corpse Bride?
Corpse Bride, I've changed my mind since the first time I watched it. The very first time I watched it, I didn't like it. And then I think over the years, I think some time had passed and I watched it again. And I was like, oh, you know what? It wasn't so bad. I definitely don't think it's as good as The Nightmare Before Christmas. I think the story is a very interesting story. I do like the story. I don't think the music is as good or as memorable. I think you have a beautiful piano duet that happens between our two main characters. But I wish there was more of that piano piece. It kind of just gets like cut off at the end. And I was like, oh, you got to this like beautiful moment. I wanted to hear more. And so, but I understand why they cut it off. You know, they're trying to make the movie last a little longer, but there aren't many singing songs. Like, I think I think The Bride has a song.
There's maybe like 5.
There's piano music, which I really, really liked. There was the song, something at the end of the day, like where they land at the, where they're in the afterlife. And that song, I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't find it as interesting the first time. The second or third time I heard it, I was like, okay, it's not so bad. So I think just to kind of close up my initial thoughts, I think it's okay.
Yeah, Corpse Bride. So the premise is very, very simple. It's just that like Johnny Depp runs into the woods not knowing how to get married, and then he puts his ring on this branch, but it turns out it's
Johnny
a dead.
Depp.
Yeah.
I guess it kind of looked like him.
Johnny Depp runs into the woods. He doesn't know how to get married. He ends up saying his vows perfectly in the woods, puts the ring on a branch. The branch was not a branch. It was a corpse's hand. The corpse is revived.
Again, very morbid. There's a corpse's hand sticking out of the ground.
It's playing with the murdered wife, murdered bride idea, mysterious thing. And she comes alive and then they're married. And the movie kind of goes with the hijinks of that. And it's very simple. And yet in the movie is kind of stupidly congested despite being so simple. I also agree with you that this is significantly less good than Nightmare Before Christmas. Yeah. And yet, like, it also has so many things in it that I really liked.
Yes.
Surrounded by so many things that I thought were, like, less than mediocre. They were just like, wow. Yeah. Like, I literally, like, the plot is really bad. There's not much.
I didn't think the plot was that bad. Go ahead.
I get it. I just think it's like, because Nightmare has almost no plot. It's almost just like setups for jokes and events just take place. Like the joke is, what if a Skeleton King was Santa? And then they just kind of show what that is and the events they kind of take on. And then it does what you think it'll do it by the end. But that's because the movie's more about to me, like Nightmare Before Christmas is so experiential. It feels like you're being like elevated to a place that's so otherworldly. Whereas Corpse Bride wants to be a bit more of a movie with characters, and like these characters don't make much sense. There's like a point where I was saying to Kat, like, I don't know why they're mad at each other. I was like, why are these characters upset? What did they didn't do anything. I don't even know really what they want from each other. So why are they mad?
And even
so
some
weird.
of the side characters, like I really didn't like the worm and the spider.
The worm is not funny and the spider is not funny.
I just didn't really find them that necessary. And as you're talking, I'm like, oh, that is another song. Oh, that is another song.
There's like
I guess they're just not as memorable.
They're not memorable. Yeah. There's no hooks. It's, I think, Danny Elfman again. I think I remember seeing that in the credit. I'll just double check to make sure I got it right.
He usually does all of his
but they just don't hit it. It feels almost lazy. Some parts feel lazy, whereas some parts feel great. Like, I think the Corpse Bride is a queen. She's got a great design. She is consistently great.
She looks very good.
She's the best. She's the right choice. And like, but then like the rest of the movie is kind of mid. I like that the normal world is grayscale, but then the dead world is colorful.
Yes, I loved that detail.
It just plays up with like
very interesting.
That's part of like, I think, where Tim Burton succeeds is when he does contrasting material, which is why we like a lot of his movies. Is he puts a weirdo in the real world, and then you see how they play around in it.
I will say though, I think that now we have to remember this is a kid's film. I don't think it's meant to be thought through this deeply, but there can also be something said about why is the land of the dead so colorful versus the land of the living so sad. And I don't think you want to give off, and again, I'm pretty sure this was not their intention, but I could see someone rationalizing, oh, it's better to be on the other side than it is to be here. Do you see what I'm saying?
You mean like being unalive?
Yes.
That's what the Gen Zers call it. No, I...
And again, that is not... I am almost positive that is not the vibe that they were going for.
I agree
but I had that thought and I'm like, no, that's not what they meant, but I could totally see that.
That's funny.
Like, that's awkward, and
that's true. I like that read though. It's funny. I do think it plays in with Tim Burton's cynicism and general, like, I wouldn't say that he doesn't in his movies. I don't mean him as a person. I just mean in his movies. I don't think in his movies he feels that nothing matters. But he definitely plays with that mantra. That's how he can kind of have these weird things and have them happen. And then they can be funny because he's contrasting them with characters who think things do matter or such and such whatever. And Frankenweenie kind of does that, but flips it where the characters that are weird are the ones doing things that matter. And the characters that are quote unquote normal are actually the characters doing things that are like senseless. But yeah, Corpse Bride, the real world is drab and boring and miserable, but then the dead world, it's almost like, to me, it's like your cares and your woes have passed on. It's very much it's not a Christian view. It's like an ideology of like,
because it's not like they're going to heaven. They're literally just on another plane.
And it's like the same architecture. It's the same place. Like it's almost the same. Yeah. Like it's still dirty and gross, but there's just a beauty to it that makes it more.
Dimension.
Yeah, it's more appealing. And I can understand that if you're coming at it from a worldly perspective. If you were convinced and believe that at least, even if there was nothing after death, and you would even have perception of what it was to be alive because now you're nothing, then that would ostensibly be better than life because you're not miserable because you don't exist anymore because you're not there. So I think he's playing with that in terms of theming and ideology. But I don't think the movie's about it because it's not.
Right. And again, that's just that worldview is not true. So
yeah, but narratively it does add some fun to how the characters act and work. Like in the real world, the characters are kind of bitter and aloof and all over, but down in the dead world, there's like a joy and a fun to kind of what's going on. But again, it just doesn't. Like Nightmare Before Christmas, the movie is kind of light. It doesn't have what it's reaching for, which is frustrating because it has the Corpse Bride, which is a really cool character. Right. Enjoying this episode?
Grab that share link and tell your friends. Word of mouth is the most effective way for a podcast to reach new listeners, so don't be shy. Share the episode wherever you can.
That was the other thing I was going to say. They're trying to keep it light, but unlike Frankenweenie and unlike The Nightmare Before Christmas, this is not just a death, but literally someone being murdered.
Yes.
And not just something, and again, lightness, like in The Haunting, like poison, like this was like an act of malicious intent. Like she was literally strangled to death.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, that is so, that is a lot. That is very, very dark. And so I could definitely see how some parents maybe wouldn't want their children to watch this particular film. But I do think they do a good job of, like, how when the story is being told, they do a good job of just using silhouettes so that maybe it doesn't look as aggressive. Again, I think it is helpful that these are dolls and cartoons and not like real actual people. So these would be films, just to make a side note, because of the darkness of these films, yet the lightness of them being dolls, these would not be films I would want to see live action. Just putting it out there. Because I know like they
would be so less interesting.
Exactly. It would not be as, I don't want to see real people doing this, if I'm going to be honest. I think we would lose the lightness of the story. I think it would be a little too easy to take it too seriously. And then I think the tone of the film would just be completely off. And it kind of like what happened with Sabrina the Teenage Witch when they made it into a TV show. Just
with
watching
Netflix,
the TV show with Netflix. Yeah, it seemed, I didn't watch everything. I think I watched bits and pieces of the first season, but I think the tone of it was off because it's like a teen, like fantasy and like kind of story. Yet there were just these really, really dark things that it's like, I don't know if they want me to take this so seriously,
they Riverdaled it.
Or if they or if they don't want
Riverdale
me to that
took
much.
Off. Like all teen dramas turned very serious, and that's why you go from like Riverdale to Euphoria, because you have like these people
I've never
who
even watched Euphoria. I'm like, I can't. It's too much.
I've heard it's just not even that good because it's just so senseless. And I forget the guy who made it, but he's a hack. So I get what you're saying. I think that there's a sense in which like the material, even Corpse Bride, which I would not say is the worst, but is definitely the most like incomplete of the three. Corpse Bride even still captures its medium in a way that makes it really enjoyable. Because I really still liked, like, none of the music wows, and even the best song, which is I think to me is the one when they finally get married and go into the bar down in the Dead World. It's very jazzy and fun and bouncy.
Yeah.
But even then, like when it cuts to the bridge, it feels like they edited to cut to the bridge ahead of time, and then when the bridge is over, they cut out a part
too,
where it was supposed to be there, which is weird because this movie's also, it's 77 minutes, so it's like, why not just make it a little longer? I don't know. Maybe that was the song, so I might be just imagining things, but it's very strange. This one, apart from the other two, is Warner Brothers. So I am curious too if it's a case of like Warner Brothers saying like, hey, make us a Nightmare Before Christmas, make us something that does a lot of sales. Corpse Bride aesthetically does look great. I do like a lot about the visuals. It has less to play with than Nightmare Before Christmas, where like pretty much every character has its own artwork and stuff.
Yes, the mayor with two faces.
Gosh, it's good. All of them, they look so good. We didn't even talk about how they animate perspective a lot, but Nightmare had really great perspective playing along with it in the Halloween Town in particular. But in Corpse Bride, the visual of the bride is just so good that like that still gets sales. But unlike Nightmare, there's just not a lot of character in these characters either.
That's true.
Nightmare doesn't have a lot of plot, but it has enough character to give you a bit more. And then Corpse Bride, it's just not. I don't know, but I found it funny. I found a lot of the parts of the movie pretty funny. I got a very, very good laugh towards the end when they're having this dinner scene and these skeletons show up. And a skeleton's
Yes.
eyeball falls out, and just a man says, like, there's an eyeball in me soup. It just got me. It sent me. It was so funny. But
Yeah.
it really is, like, I finished it and I was like, well, I wish it was better. I really, really wish Corpse Bride was better.
Did you like the twist at the end with the fiance being the one that, and this is a spoiler, so if you haven't seen it, just skip this. But when you find out the fiance, the guy that's been lurking around was actually the one who killed the Corpse Bride?
I kind of suspected it, just in terms of like,
okay,
like I was like,
that was
okay,
a surprise for me.
We're probably narratively going to say that one of the characters we've been introduced to killed the Corpse Bride, because she didn't just die, she was murdered, and we learned that a bit earlier. So I was like, okay, there will be some narrative connection to it. But because the plot is such a mess, it really genuinely feels like it's not even done. It goes beginning to end, but even my wife was like, yeah, you kind of get to the end, and then it seems like Tim Burton doesn't know what to do, and so she just turns into butterflies and flies away. And then it just credits roll.
Well, she's at peace now.
Yeah,
but I get it.
But the movie just, like, it is a mess. And so for me, I was like, oh, maybe it's that character that everyone was like, who are you? And it was exactly that character. What's so weird, though, is Frankenweenie is technically a more finished movie, and yet I would rather watch Corpse Bride, just because the bride is so charismatic, and all the other characters are even more charismatic. But and the Nightmare Before Christmas, of course, is like amazing. So like I would just watch that in general anyway. But that's like a perfect watch intently or put it on in the background. It's great. But yeah, Corpse Bride, though, I liked it, and I'm really happy to have finished it. I could see it being a fun one to talk about even more at length, like if we were to do a longer form discussion or something. There's just enough about filmmaking and storytelling in the movie that doesn't work, that actually kind of makes it interesting to talk about, because it's not done. How is this movie out already? It's weird.
Hey there, listener. Want to influence the podcast? Head on over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine and support the show for $3 a month. In doing so, you'll be able to vote on a movie poll that picks a film we discuss each month. So jump on over there and have your voice heard.
I wanted to also just talk about how not only in Nightmare, but especially in the Corpse Bride, like she herself has just been a huge inspiration for not only Halloween costumes, but for cosplay, and especially for makeup artists. So there's like this whole world of makeup artists who will, especially like on TikTok and on Instagram, where they will kind of be quoting these scenes from the film. But as they're quoting, like they go from one frame to the next and more of their makeup is complete. And then the whole thing, I'll send some of them to you, but like then the whole thing is done and they look completely transformed into these doll-like characters. And women especially really seem to enjoy being the Corpse Bride. And I've just seen a lot of different renditions of it, and they're all amazing. But it's just interesting to see how, even though it wasn't maybe the best or like stop motion animation or just the best story or the best plot, I think the animation was still pretty decent.
Oh, it was good.
Yeah, people loved her. Like a lot of people just really found her to be very endearing, very, like you said, very charismatic, very unique, and have replicated her look time and time again. So I think that how these films inspire cosplay, how they inspire makeup is really neat. I was watching this show, Glow Up, where these like it's a competition show, makeup artists trying to be the best, blah blah blah.
Nice.
And so there was one person in particular who they had to do like a cartoon look, and the character this person created was called something like Miss Lonely Evermore or Sad Evermore. I don't know. Some kind of sad person. But when you looked at the cartoon, the makeup looked great, but you could totally tell that this person was inspired by Tim Burton. Like it was like a blend of the Corpse Bride and Sally. almost from
Mm-hmm.
The Nightmare Before Christmas. It just had a lot of those features, but definitely with the blue and like the shape of the eyes that they did, very Corpse Bride. And so I just think it's just really fascinating how these simple film or how these cartoons and how these dolls can just inspire like so many people to do so many different things with it.
Well, I think the fact that it is animated means if you're young people just like to create, because it's like you just have all this energy and you don't know what to do with it. So you're like making things, you're drawing things, you're doing stuff. So like cartoon characters are just infinitely easier to draw than humans. And since these little figures, these characters are more cartoonish than human, they're easy to draw. So you get more fascinated and your fixation's easier. And then in addition to that, at least in contrast to Nightmare Before Christmas, the Corpse Bride has a lot more character and innocence than, like, as one of the lead characters than Sally. Sally has a lot of innocence, but not a lot of character, whereas the Corpse Bride is someone who is romantically in love, was murdered, has come back, but under, like, ignorant, dubious means, because it's, like, on accident, but it's, like, he's being a jerk about it. She is intelligent. She knows what kind of gifts to get him. She's smart about where to go for things. They're able to. So she has like a lot of independence and character that I think in that way means you don't just want to look like her. You want to be like her. And then even in the end, like even though narratively it's like, no, just be together. Like she still makes the honorable decision as the movie dictates, even though technically they were married first. That
you thought it was a stick, Melvin. I don't think that counts.
Doesn't matter.
Whatever.
She's still the better choice.
Aw.
It's just a fact. Corpse Bride is the best. Corpse Bride is the right choice.
She's dead, Melvin.
This is why.
It's
that's
not
just
the
a
better
quirk.
choice.
We can work around it.
It's
we'll
just
find
a quirk that she's not living.
There's Mindless Self-Indulgence, the band, one of their albums. Zombie Girls are kind of cute, though, aren't they? Or something. I think that it's called.
Oh my gosh.
Corpse Bride, though, she was the right choice. But she's quirky. She's different. She has something wrong with her, but on the inside, she does not. Tell me that doesn't describe young girls with low self-esteem. The idea that like there's something wrong with me, but and so there's aspiration and self-insertion that's taking place with the character. So I could totally understand wanting to imitate them in certain ways, and I don't imply like idolization, although some people might do that, but I literally mean like there's healthy ways in which we want to attract and equate traits of people we look up to, and characters are fictional things that we want to look to. So in that way, I think that that's really sweet. And yes, I can definitely attest to like Nightmare Before Christmas, huge on fashion. We already talked about that.
Yeah.
Corpse Bride, huge on fashion, especially in less so much graphic tees, but more just aesthetic and appeal.
Yeah.
It's massive and it's just nuts. I don't know. I think it's just that Tim Burton has such a, his direction for deciding what to keep aesthetically. Because I don't know what his involvement is in the artwork. I didn't watch special features, so I didn't see like if he's penning these characters or not, or if he's simply saying, here's my vision, can you work this in for me? Which is, directors could do that, because not every director is a great artist. They're just a good director. His penchant, though, for picking what works is great. Because, yeah, Corpse Bride, even though the worm is annoying, I did like how the worm worked when it was in her head as like a voice of conscience, which they then make an overt joke about. But I like that because I thought that was, again, something you can self-insert with, where you're talking yourself down when you actually don't have any need to. But his ability to pick everything just right visually, I think, is to his benefit. Because Frankenweenie also hits that. I think Frankenweenie looks very good.
Yes.
It's just... sometimes I think with the 3 movies, he didn't direct Nightmare, so maybe that's just Henry Selick killing it. But with these 2 movies in particular, his ability for storytelling is just a bit not there, which is a silly criticism for me to make, because my favorite movie of his is still Mars Attacks, and that movie is absurd. But I think that movie is
so amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
Sorry, I just started thinking about it.
It's so good.
It's so nuts.
You have to. if anybody is thinking I'm crazy or either of us are crazy for liking it, the first time I watched it, I thought there were parts that were funny, but I really didn't like it. And then at one point, I just put it on to put it on. And it was the funniest movie I'd ever seen. It was like so much better.
Great.
Yeah,
oh my
it's a good
gosh.
one. So I know he's got a massive catalog of films, so I want to check them out while I still can. Want some quick updates on the podcast? Follow the Cinematic Doctrine Instagram for cool posts and story updates. Press the link in the show notes or search Cinematic Doctrine, that's one word, in your Instagram app. Oh, and we're on Threads. Check us out there too. All right, so Frankenweenie. Frankenweenie is from 2012. It's the last, as far as I could see from his filmography, the last of Tim Burton's produced, directed definitely, but at least produced also. I don't know, scrub that. But I guess, Melvin, you edit the show, scrub it. But it's the last of the three we're going to be talking about of his stop motion animation features. Frankenweenie, he actually made a short film with Disney back in 1984, a live action short film. I don't know if you've actually, did you know about that before or no? Have you seen it?
No, I actually didn't know about that. This is the first I'm hearing.
I saw it because it was on my Nightmare Before Christmas 25th anniversary special edition, which was very cool.
Excellent.
Which must have released before, so maybe it wasn't 25th anniversary, but it released before Frankenweenie, the new movie. So, well, not new. I guess it's 11 years old. It released before the version we have now, because in the introduction to the short film, Tim Burton said how they were working on it and how he was like, I wanted to make it a full movie, but I didn't have the time or the budget. So then I went ahead and did this, and now we're going to do it live actions or stop motion. Anyways, the live action was pretty fun. I liked it. It's got the short film symptom, not symptom as in a negative, but just the idea that, like, if you've seen the full movie, when you go back to watch the short film, you're basically going to watch the same scenes, but just done a little differently. But it did actually have some stuff that's different, which I'll talk about after we talk a bit about Frankenweenie, because in 2012, he redid it as a full-length movie. This is the longest of the three. The Lord knows why. I do not. It is an hour and 27 minutes. I don't know why he chose this one to be the longer one.
Right.
The premise is a young boy named Victor, which funnily enough, fans have noticed is also the same name as the character in Corpse Bride. Yep. And all the dogs in these three movies look similar. So some people joke that it is the same dog. But Victor has this young dog, and the dog gets killed by a car. So then he revives it. And so begin the hijinks of a Frankenstein dog. It is cute. Have you seen Frankenweenie before? And what did you think of it?
Well, I kind of dodged this movie. I just wasn't that interested in the premise, but I watched it for the podcast. And surprisingly, I really liked it. I thought the beginning for me was a little bit slow. So I was kind of like, nah, this is kind of boring. I'm not really enjoying myself. But then as the movie progressed, I started to become more fascinated. So I loved, just about like character design, it usually seems like Tim Burton likes extremes. So like with the eyes, they're usually very big. The characters, if they're skinny, they're very skinny. Or if they're like overweight, then they almost look like bloated and stuffed. Like it's just, he's very into these extremes. And I think that that's fascinating. And so you see a lot of that again in this film. And so there's this one girl with the cat. Her eyes
She's the best character. She's
huge.
So funny.
She cracked me up because she's so weird. She says that her cat can like tell the future or something like that.
It's so good.
It's just really, really funny. And just the way that she just like, her eyes are so big and she just stares almost without blinking. It's just like really creepy to see in a child. But in a movie context, it's hilarious. And so I thought to myself, I love her. I think she's amazing.
She was funny.
Yes, and then the cat, I thought the cat was really funny as well. And the thing is that our main character, I really didn't connect with him that much. I loved the dog.
Yes.
I thought as the movie progressed, it got better for me. I really liked the ending. But I also was very fascinated by Igor, because I kept thinking to myself, of everyone else in this movie, he looks the most different.
Yes, he
out
does.
of everyone.
Yeah,
he's got a huge hunchback. His hands look like
they're very spindly.
They're very spindly, long, and like weird looking. So I'm just like, I don't think he's supposed to be a villain, but he just looks a little terrifying.
Yeah, he looks wrong.
He just looks really off, and I was wondering if they were trying to say something about that, just because he looks very unique compared to all the other like human characters. And then what really sold me on the film towards the end was when the cat transforms. How did you feel about that scene? Because it's kind of like a horror film.
I liked that the ending kind of went
that.
into that horror film-esque
area.
I thought that was really kind of fun.
It was probably my favorite part of the whole thing. One of my favorite parts.
I think the thing for me with the movie is that I really liked how it started. I actually really liked a lot of the characters, and at some point I went, "Oh, this one's going to be like the first movie of the three. Like it's going to have the most movie stuff in it, where you have your tone setting opener and you have your characters, and then we're going to see how this event is going to disrupt all that." But then there was like something, I don't know what it was. I think just like scenes just felt overly long to me.
Yeah.
And like so like the resurrection scene where Victor uses lightning to resurrect his dog instead of light, like the original Frankenstein. But I know that every interpretation of Frankenstein always uses some different kind of power to do it. But they used that, and that scene just was very long. And then there was like, the final scene with all of the different creatures, where it became more of a children's style horror movie, which this movie I think was 3D when it was in theaters, and that would have been pretty cool to watch in 3D. I think this whole movie would have been cool with the stop motion style, and then a lot of scenes were handled in a way that wasn't just like the goofy thing flying into the face like Robert Rodriguez Spy Kids kind of 3D. It seemed more like they were going to bring it to life with 3D, and then a couple scenes like that. But the horror scenes at the end, even with the there is a kaiju turtle in the movie, that also would have been pretty cool in 3D. But there was something about it that like I kind of just went like, all right, the movie's over. And like I was just waiting for the events to unfold. I don't know what it was in particular that triggered that feeling for me, but I did know that the movie was 90 minutes before pressing play. And so, and just in contrast too, because it didn't have the music, the movie doesn't have the pacing benefit of cutting into music. Or it did have music, sorry. It wasn't a musical. And Corpse Bride barely is a musical. I don't even know if you could call it that, but like, it had that to add to its pacing, because Nightmare has like the best pacing of the three, and the music's it's just basically a perfect movie. And then Corpse Bride at least has a lot of interesting things to cut to, but then Frankenweenie was very still. It is monochrome in color, it's black and white, and while it has this cast of characters to play with and work with, there was just something didn't hit with me for it. So I
would venture to say it was too long.
Why not be 70 minutes? What's the problem?
Yeah, I think a lot of these scenes could have been cut short, and you could have just gotten more to the point. With these kind of movies, I think traditionally shorter is better. Again, I think it's beautifully done. I think the animation is fantastic. I like that it had this like black and white like tone to it. Like it was very muted, not I don't think there was any color. Was there?
There was maybe yellow to represent electricity, but only like 3 times, because not all the electric was yellow.
Yeah. And I just liked, there were aspects of the story that I did like, but again, you could have kept all of that within a shorter film. So like one of my other favorite scenes was when his parents find out that he resurrected the dog. and their response was just so loving. I loved that. So you have they find the dog, and of course they're going to scream and be surprised because the dog's supposed to be dead. But then they can see how upset their son is. And I'm even going to cry just thinking about it. They can see how their son is so upset. And instead of like screaming him and shaking him, saying, "How dare you do this? What were you thinking?" They just say to him, "Son, we're going to help you find your dog. But then we're going to have a conversation about this." Because I think they just wanted to like teach him like how this may have not been the most responsible thing for you to do.
Yeah, you brought something back to life.
Right, from the dead. But again, you could tell that they understood. You could tell that they loved him and cared about him, and that they cared about what he cared about. They knew how much he really loved that dog, and they were willing to help him find it. And I think that was just such a really sweet, quick, but very sweet and endearing moment. And I noticed it immediately, and I really, really loved that. And I liked the ending, of course, because I got my happy ending. And I think I even cried at the end, because I was just like, the idea of, it's another way to talk about death in a way that children can understand. Just this idea that you have to let go. And I would almost venture to say, even though I did like the ending, because I was like, oh, he does get to keep his dog, I kind of would have liked it better if his dog had just passed on. Because I think that would have been a better lesson for children, that there are things that we can't control, and that sometimes we do just need to let certain things go. Because obviously what happened to his dog was an accident, but that happens to pets in life. Sometimes they get into those accidents or they pass away, and we just need to find ways to move on in a healthy way. And so I don't think Victor knew how to do that, because again, he's a child, and of course this is the premise of the film.
Well, but it's not E.T., so
exactly.
Yeah,
I just think it would have been really interesting, an interesting ending, but I also think it could have been upsetting for a lot of children, which is probably why they just decided to let him keep the dog.
Been itching for Cinematic Doctrine merch? Check out the support tiers on Patreon. We're offering merch to those who support at select tiers. So head on over to patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine and share your support. There's a link in the show notes too.
We didn't really talk about, we didn't talk about overt themes of these three movies because they're not actually that prominent.
Right.
Like the first movie is just a fun movie. Corpse Bride is a mess, but it's like a beautiful mess.
A beautiful disaster.
It really is. Like it really, like I when it finished, I was like, come on. But like, then you have Frankenweenie, where like it's the most movie, but even then, like some of it's like very like messy with its theming. So it sort of plays with stuff like fear of science. There's like a scene where like all the people I
loved that scene. Oh my
great.
gosh, when his science teacher goes up there and basically insults the whole town.
It's so funny. What does he say? It's like, I would like to prescribe you as ignorant. Ignorant's not the right word.
He's like, you all have stupid. Small brains.
Yes.
He just said something like that, and he's like, all right, and goodbye.
They could play that scene at like every PTA meeting at this point.
Oh my gosh, I was cracking up. I love that scene so much.
That was a good scene. I feel like I remember hearing criticism about the movie because of that scene, but that's just so absurd.
Oh goodness.
Because the movie kind of plays with the fact that like aesthetically they're in like a 50s small town, and it's like an ideal world, but then like they bring this dog back to life, and these people think it's a monster, and the science teacher is like, it's science. It's not a monster. We can learn it and understand it, but you guys are too afraid and too scared and too comfortable.
And they were more upset because of the science fair. Like not even like first of all, those two children it was their fault.
That's right. He got injured. That's right.
Yeah. Like that their experiment went wrong because they were being completely reckless. And the mom was upset and saying, he's teaching my kids. He's like, he didn't teach your kids to do that. And I could talk about that. That is a whole other conversation. And I'm already just feeling myself getting hyped. So before I take myself there, the point, that's the point. It's like, it's the children's responsibility to not do that experiment and to do it safely. But Anyway.
Yeah, I the Frankenweenie short film also has a bit of that, and I actually think I liked some of the Frankenweenie short film a little better, starring Shelley Duvall, who's always great. And there's like parts of it where like the dog it escapes after being resurrected, and people are scared of it. One person thinks it's a monster. Maybe this is what I was mixing it up with. That's probably why I watched them pretty much one after another. But there's a neighbor who thinks like this monster tried to eat my child, but she saw it. It was just a dog. And I don't think she even has a child in the movie. And she keeps playing up these things. And then the creature's getting bigger when she describes it. And all these things are just not true. And she's actually the reason the riot starts to then chase Frankenweenie out to where the burning thing is. And so in typical fashion, Tim Burton, similar to how we never... we turn our blind eye to the fact that Adam Sandler plays neurodivergent characters for jokes and laughs, never necessarily making fun of them, but it could be considered very insensitive. We similarly do that with Tim Burton when he's making fun of things like ignorance, size. You talked about his design and size, but I do think he plays up the fact that like there are new jokes that are comedic gags, not verbal, but physical, when you play with the size of the human form, which is technically true. There are things you can do with that. A fairly odd... Cartoons have done it forever. Maybe they shouldn't, but it's something that is in the toolkit, so he uses it. But he does that a lot with his movies, is where he plays up the idea of like people being ignorant or willful, and they end up often being the people who are very destructive to the group. And I think I've said it in other podcasts where like I'm never really all that comfortable with people who are rich and successful making fun of people who are not, because it would actually just be more helpful to reach your hand down and help those people. But I do think there's a place for it. Yeah, all the movies, Nightmare doesn't really include that. Corpse Bride does a little bit, and then Frankenweenie definitely did. And then of course my favorite one is Mars Attacks, which everybody's an idiot in that one, so I guess there's that. But yeah, I think a lot of what I've seen from Tim Burton is that he likes to play with these things, but he doesn't really say a lot about them. I think he just uses those pieces to build a puzzle that's actually just really interesting to look at. But I never get the sense that he's saying much of anything other than like, let's have fun with a good laugh and cynicism. Maybe there's listeners who have really watched his catalog and they know more about what his vibe is, but that's at least what I get from this stuff. I don't know about you, but...
Yeah, I mean, and I think I would agree, and that a lot of his films are just, I think they're very present-minded. I don't really know if we're supposed to go super deep with all of them, especially like The Nightmare Before Christmas. But I also know that people will bring with them their own experiences as they experience art, and people will interpret things how in whatever way makes sense to them. So there could be people that watch these films and they do have deeper, stronger feelings, or maybe have perceived things that maybe wasn't the initial intention of the art, but that's just kind of where they are with it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it would just depend on who you talk to, and you know, they'll be able to express more what they experienced, what they perceived from these films. But yeah, I agree. I think the story, while being more of a full out movie, was just, everything was kind of like there for you to experience. There wasn't like a lot to like have to decipher or figure out as far as like what he was trying to convey. It's pretty surfacey, I think. Which
is so odd because, like we said, it's also like of the three, at least for me, Frankenweenie is like the one where I'm like, I don't think I'll rewatch that like almost ever.
I could see maybe not being like an avid rewatch. Like I watched The Nightmare Before Christmas like
every year,
1,000 times. Like I almost watch it every single year just because I enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
For the Halloween season, of course. But yeah, it's Frankenweenie. I think I could see myself watching it again.
Are you a Nightmare Before Christmas is a Halloween movie then? Not a Christmas movie person?
I think just because I want to see it again, I make it Halloween because Halloween's sooner than Christmas.
Yeah.
But I would say it's both. I don't know if you could say it's more of one than the other because they just divide their time in both places. And that's the that's the genius of the film, I think, too.
I'm trying to think of what would be a good final question for these three, because all right, which one would you soon show? No, it would be Nightmare again too. I was going to say which would you show to a friend first? It's Nightmare. All right, which character would you cosplay first?
Oh, that's a good one. Who would I cosplay? You know who I'd actually want to do, just because I think it would be really interesting?
Mm-hmm.
I would want to be the little girl in the trio in The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Shot, Lock, and Barrel. I don't remember.
Yes, I can't remember.
She's in the middle.
Oh my gosh, yeah, she's in the middle. I can't remember which one is which, but I think it'd be really cool to play her for Halloween. I wouldn't be able to do like the shape of her head, obviously, because I think it's like a triangle.
yeah.
But I just feel like the costume itself and just not running around, but like, because I think I'd scare people, but like walking around singing the song would just be like really, really fun and exciting. But yeah, I think I would do that first, just because also everybody does the Corpse Bride because the Corpse Bride is amazing. Everybody does Sally because Sally is also amazing. So I would want to just pick something that not everyone is doing.
Mm-hmm. My silly answer is I will be the guy who says there's an eyeball in his soup. But my real answer would be a gender-bent version of the Corpse Bride. So I'll be like everybody else too. I think there'd be a fun way to do like a masculine, glowing aesthetic to it that isn't so effeminate, because her outfit is very effeminate. But hey,
but people
whatever.
do that all the time. Like
I'm very confident in myself.
They'll take Jack
Skellington
Skellington and like do like a female version of that, or they'll merge characters together in some way. So yeah, I could see you doing that.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Cinematic Doctrine. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review and subscribing to the podcast. And as mentioned before, Cinematic Doctrine has a Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you're opted into a once-a-month movie poll where you decide a movie we discuss on the podcast. There are other unique benefits that come with supporting the podcast, so be sure to check that out at patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine. A special shout out to those who support at the Art House Theater tier on Patreon. Thank you so much, Mom, Dad, Melanie, Shirley-Ann, and Thomas. You guys are the best, and your continued monetary support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, stay cool. Want some Cinematic Doctrine swag? You're in luck. We've got 3-inch Cinematic Doctrine logo stickers exclusive for Patreon supporters. Perfect for your travel mug or laptop. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine, link in the show notes, and choose the independent theater tier. Doing so will net you other perks too. But let's be real, the podcast stickers are the coolest perk. So get yourself some podcast stickers by supporting on Patreon.